Tell the folks what we were chatting about just a second ago. You said you almost knocked somebody out with your hair.
Oh, yeah. My hair is a deadly weapon. I can technically strangle fate with my hair without like shifting my head or anything. Yes. My hair is a deadly weapon. I may or may not have bruised a coworker with my hair at one point because I have metal beads in my hair. There's right here is like a little raven bead that I have.
Wow. I can imagine like a cyberpunk weapon where you put little, razors on them and whip people to death. Oh my gosh. With the 24 months, Star Kitty, thank you, my love.
2 whole years. That's wild.
That means that I've been affiliated for 2 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Time has flown
Congratulations on 2 years of being affiliated.
Thank you.
Affiliated.
Yes, it's awesome. We got Dagoth and Banana Tom here. Dagoth, buddy, you were here. OG Blaze was first. Holy crap! I'll bet you. Knowing Dagoth though, he was there. He just was not as quick on the typing draw as OG Blaze was. But we appreciate both of you guys, whether you were first or second.
Or if you show up at the very end.
That's right.
Or if you see this later on YouTube.
Or
also, don't forget, in the future people, don't forget to like and subscribe here on YouTube. It does amazing things. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you all so much. We're here again today for another RPG talk on Bandwidth and Banter. And today is a bit of a deep dive. We're going to be, hey OG Blaze, he had 3 minutes before you, so very possible Dagoth was here first. Yeah. So the deep dive today, I say that, I don't mean that as in kind of I mean that in a philosophical way, because what we're talking about today, as you can see in the title, is alignment in character races part 1. I think it's going to take at least a couple of sessions to discuss this topic for our RPG. That is because if you think about it, kind of philosophically, they are interesting, deep topics of conversation.
Yes.
As Druid knows, and a lot of folks who watch us know, I obviously have been doing this a long time, but throughout all that time, I've never really been a big fan of alignment. I kind of loosely use it from time to time, but from a philosophical perspective, I feel like it limits something. It limits things in places that don't need limiting. Here's the thing. In game theory, you got to understand that when you set limits, those limits are meant to either create some sort of challenge or to create something meaningful out of that particular moment in a game, right? That what it needs to accomplish something. When you're setting a limit, it's meant to accomplish something. There are some limits you can set on things that create cool moments, or they just create these experiences. And then there are some limits you can set that end up being really bad ideas. Okay.
Yeah.
And some are kind of gray areas. Like if you're talking about just like from a mechanic standpoint, I can give you an example of a limit that was set in a popular game series that makes no sense and actually actively hurts the game, I feel like. And that's when they, Daggerfall had climbing and levitation. And in Morrowind, they got rid of climbing. And in Skyrim, they got rid of both climbing and levitation.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand the reason why they did that was not philosophical. It was simply because they didn't want, they were creating dungeons in ways that they didn't want the story to be circumvented by someone who could scale obstacles. And
Yeah.
I feel like that was just lazy design process. I feel like they should have been able to figure out a way to make those storylines work even when because they had already established that in Elder Scrolls previous games you could climb and levitate. That isn't something that they should take away after the fact. That's an example of a mechanic, right? But in regards to alignment, so again, as I was saying, when you're setting a limit on something, you want that limit to be meaningful and make the game more fun, not less fun.
Yes.
And I think in the original idea of it, interestingly enough, a little bit of quick history. The original box set, basic expert box sets of D&D, didn't have the alignments that we have nowadays. They technically did have alignments, but they were only lawful, neutral, and chaotic. They didn't include the good or evil descriptor. That was only added in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, or second edition, probably Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And I understand that they were trying to create a kind of a role-playing nuance. But hi guys. The problem is that philosophically speaking, there's no, like when you set that kind of limit, you actually take away the nuance of what it is to be a living, conscious entity making choices, right?
Yes.
You, by saying, oh, my character is always lawful good, or my character is always chaotic evil, you're setting such a hard limit that it eliminates any nuance, right? And then it creates these silly arguments where the DM might say, oh, well, your character wouldn't do that because he's chaotic evil, or you can say, well, my character would do that because he's this or that, and then you're into this philosophical conversation. The reason why I'm not a big fan of alignments is simply for that reason, is that it creates a limit where there doesn't need to be one. To have a story where characters are interacting in a world that you've created, that limit doesn't have to be there. The nuance comes in the way they act, right?
Yes.
So if a person who's created a character has a certain personality that they feel and certain drives and motivations that character has, they can role play those things, and then the acts that they take in regards to those motivations ends up being the result, whether it be quote unquote good or evil or neutral or chaotic or lawful, etc.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that by saying, like, everybody is gray. Not everybody's completely good. Not everybody's completely bad. Like, it's everything is always in that gray zone.
Yeah.
And it is very much a like, because I don't know how I would react to certain things until it's presented to me.
Right.
And in the heat of the moment, it might actually not be the best thing. And that doesn't make me evil because I decided on impulse in the heat of a moment to do something that for example, in like my other D&D game that we play on Fridays, I'm playing a character who grew up as a bounty hunter and has seen a lot of crazy things happen. And she's not a bad person, but her initial reaction in a situation is to, like grab them, hold them, and interrogate them. And that did bring up some of these like interesting questions of like, well, is Gwendolyn good or bad? Well, Gwendolyn's not bad. She just was in the heat of the moment, was trying to get answers, and she chose to do this thing. But she's not bad. She's just, so like, I completely agree with you, and it's very nuanced. And being trapped by like the chaotic or lawful good or all of those things, like I think it's a good starting point, but it's not like it should completely dictate everything. Like, it's a really good foundation. Like, Fern is chaotic neutral.
I don't know, but the way you've played her, I would say she's more chaotic good. You see, that's the thing. That's the point I'm making, is the interpretation happens after the fact. Mm-hmm. How do you decide ahead of time that I'm going to always act a certain way in every situation?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I feel like it's okay to have the alignments there as sort of a guide to a general kind of, if a person who makes a character in an RPG feels like they need that sort of guide as a core to where to start from, that's okay. It's a scale, right? It's a gradient.
It's a starting off point.
Right. But I feel like it's something we need to talk about for our RPG we're creating, because I would be totally fine with eliminating them from the game altogether. Right? And there's some reasons for that beyond just this philosophical talk that we're having now. One of them is relates to character races, right? Because in D&D, at least in the past, in the history of D&D, even though that's kind of slightly changing with some of the newer books in 5th ed, it was kind of very black and white. There were certain kinds of races that were the quote-unquote evil races, right? The orcs and hobgoblins and goblins and kobolds and those kinds of things. But if you think about it philosophically, how is it really truly possible that an entire race of beings is just straight up always evil, right? I understand that their culture might be raised, their culture might be evil, but then you have these really interesting nuanced stories where somebody came out of that culture and wasn't evil anymore, right?
Yes.
And you can go the other way too, right? You can have a culture that's you could have like a fairy culture where all the fey creatures, they're all about healing and light and love and stuff. But then there's this one fey who just ends up being a bit too chaotic and goes down. And like there's what I'm saying. There's always this nuance. And that's why anyone should be able to make a character race anything that they want. And if you go that route for the player characters, then really you should also do that on the other side of the DM screen, right? It means that it's up to the DM to create a more complex and nuanced, kind of world where, if you're going to have a nation that's authoritarian and wants to conquer everybody, that's from the top down, right? And that's fine that their culture and their nation is that way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every single person of that particular race or nation is going to be evil. There's going to be exceptions. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. Why I think that we should not limit the races that way when we create our RPG, and we should not limit the alignment of player characters. I just don't see the need to have it, because it creates limits where there don't need to be any. When players play, they can play in a nuanced way. I guess what I'm getting at is now, that's not to say that you don't want to, if a player creates a character and in their background, a lot of their background is you can basically nuance your character in interesting ways. You could have a background where the parts of your background kind of lead you to certain kinds of choices and personality types as a potential, you know what I mean? As they're gonna happen more often than not. With a certain background, you're gonna have certain kinds of choices, right? But again, there's even times where that's not true either, because let's say you had a character who grew up, their parents were awful, evil beings, and they abused them and did terrible things to them, and there was murder and death and violence around them all the time. That kind of person would more than likely potentially be another evil person. But that's not always true. And some of the most interesting characters are characters that came out of that, right? And chose a different path because they ended up being self-aware enough to see, oh, wow, this isn't what I want. This isn't good for me. And so I want to, do something uplifting with my life, right? Yeah. And also, again, it's a fantasy game. It's an RPG. So you can go the opposite way, right? If you want to make a really dark character, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. But a dark character, even a chaotic evil character, is occasionally going to do good things in the name of their own kind of selfishness, right? Like if they're part of a party of people that they have grown attached to in some way, they're going to potentially do things that protect those people, right? So I don't know. I guess that's why I wanted to discuss this a bit. I like what Daddy Dagoth says. There's no limits here in Stormkeep. Well, that's not entirely true, but yeah. Thank you,
there's
Ezo.
No limits.
And Rusty, thanks for joining. Enjoy your work lurk. Have a good one. I appreciate you, brother, so much. So yeah, I mean that's kind of where I'm at in regards to maybe it isn't that maybe it won't need a two-parter. I don't know. I think it will, because there's another part that kind of goes into this. You and I talked about this a little bit earlier, and that's that the character races in D&D and a lot of TTRPGs are honestly a little bit racist, and what, not like where there's a direct correlation to racism in the real world, but similarities, right? And the whole idea that somebody from a particular race is always going to be evil, that just, like I said, I don't like this concept. It philosophically, it doesn't actually make sense. And then, and then on top of that, the other thing, it's kind of smacks of colonialism, right? Because a lot of the demi-human races, like goblins and hobgoblins and orcs, they're always depicted as wearing, like skins and hides and leathers and stuff like that, like they're tribal people, right? And then as humans and elves and stuff move in to encroach on their territories, on their where they live, like if you really think about it, a lot of the things that adventurers do are kind of really dark and evil, right? Like the old joke that characters are basically just wandering murder hobos is kind of true, right? They basically are hobos. They're homeless people that wander into a monster's house and kill it to take its stuff. I mean, that's one way. That's a very black and white way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But that's the point, is that if you only look at it one certain way, it's very black and white, right?
Yes.
Obviously, it also depends on the story that the DM is trying to tell, right? It is very heroic for a knight and his adventuring party to wander in to slay the dragon that has been, murdering townsfolk for generations, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so then it becomes, but I guess.
And then but also on the flip side, like there are, the goblins, could be, just as like infringed upon, and just as,
right.
upset and angry, they have their own like customs, they have their own, thoughts and ideas of how they see the world. And to them, they're not evil. It's these, these humans and elves that are evil because they did all these things. And so like you could easily like roles reverse, like flip that, playing devil's advocate.
Right.
So a point that I wanted to ask then, so this all comes with like character creation. So that's kind of what we're talking about right now. Character creation, backstory, and all of that.
Right.
So then in that character creation, you pick your character race, and then you pick your backstory. Again, you create a backstory. So is that going to be something like we're going to off? Like, would we like offer like you come from this kind of a thing? Like you come from this is your race, and like these are like all of like the racial. These are all the backgrounds that you could pick from, or you could pick or you can use your own, and you can like use these things.
Right.
So like, what is So I guess my question is, what is your goal when it comes to like how would this be on paper, and how would we create the character knowing these things? Like, so does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, you're kind of, it was a great segue into the next part of what I wanted to talk about, and that is that I think that the two things that should matter most when you're making your character instead of race should be your ancestry and your background. And because when you say it like that, when you say ancestry and background, right, they're kind of similar to each other, but ancestry is really kind of like the literally your ancestral line, right?
Yes.
And background is more like your own personal story of when what got you to where you are now. And they're similar, but two different things, really.
Yeah.
And so the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because I feel like if somebody wants to make a cabal, I mean, this is kind of off topic, but also on topic. If a person wants to make a kobold who's super strong, or a gnome who's super healthy, or an elf who's super strong, well, I'm keeping, or maybe a half-orc that's not strong but is very charismatic, or they're neat. I feel like if you go this route and you don't focus on, like, there should always be exceptions. Does that make sense? And when someone is now obviously any DM can work with their players to make exceptions. And most good DMs will do that, okay? But I feel like there's no reason why we can't bake into the baseline of this game that is the way it works, right? So what I mean by that is for example, when we were making our characters, we talked about this the last time, when we talked about ability scores at first level. We talked about wanting to, on top of the level progression points you get to put into your ability scores, that you get some points to spend from your racial characteristic. But again, that's kind of racist, because it's saying, oh, well, this race is always going to be stronger than this race, and this race is always going to be faster than this race, and this race is always going to be more charismatic than this race. But honestly, that's just bullshit, right?
And I'm just going to say, like, visually, right? I'm very, fringe, right? I have big makeup. I have green hair. I have dreadlocks. I have shaved head. When I'm going out to public, I dress, very eccentric, right? You would never think the people that love me the most and I click with really, really well are a lot of the older generational people. And like you would never, like, most people assume like a lot of like older people are gonna look at me and be like, this girl has no future, right? But turn around, like, here I am this like alt girl, and they're like, and we all click really well. We all really like each other. We all get along really well. And so like obviously, like, I like, that's just another example of like just because I look away doesn't mean.
Right. Doesn't mean, yes, exactly. And
doesn't
that's exactly.
mean anything.
You nailed the point that I was trying to get to. And that's that, there's no reason why you can't just bake into the system that those kinds of things are based upon player character choice at the beginning instead of arbitrary limitations. If I want to make a hulking bruiser gnome, who likes to fist fight or carry a big ass battle axe, I should be able to do that because it's a fantasy setting, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think that's wonderful, right? Yeah, I can imagine Banana Tom gets prejudged a lot. Yeah, I can see that.
Man, I have this like clip in my head from when I was like trolling on Instagram, and I should have sent it to you because I feel like you would feel it in your soul. And I'll see if I could find it and send it to you later because it just adds on to what we're talking about right now. But yeah.
Anyway, back to it. And so I feel like here's the thing, kind of dialing back to the alignment talk. When you set the limitation differently, when we create it, we make it such that when you create your race, you can pick attributes. Wow, whichever attributes you want to boost should depend on your ancestry and your background instead of your genetic makeup.
Or what if? Or those like extra, so those extra points. Hi, Olds.
Ill to see. What up, buddy?
Those extra, so instead, like maybe instead of getting those like those racial points, those extra points come from your class.
Well, we already talked about that. The class is already going to be getting 3 points for every level up to a certain point, and then it backs off.
You're right. You're right.
So that's fine. But it occurred to me at class creation, our first level character, if we're only spending 3 points, is going to be super weak. And I get that I want to make it a tougher progression than it currently is at the beginning. And and the other reason I like our ability score progression is that you get something every single level, right?
Yeah.
But I still feel like at the first level, it might be a bit too weak. Hello, Lord of Chaos. Welcome in, first time chatter. We appreciate you. I feel like I know your name though.
He's from my somewhere.
Chat. How you doing?
This is one of my people.
Oh, one of your folks. Right on. I thought I'd seen Lord of... Yeah. Welcome in. It's an honor to have you. So, back to what I was saying about with D&D races. In the past, a lot of them, many of them, or a lot of them have been set up to say, okay, this particular race is evil. Well, if you take away alignment at all altogether, then that doesn't become a thing anymore. And then the DM can be as creative as they want. They could make a society of orcs that has super advanced, stoneworking technology, right? And they're really great at magic, and they're really peaceful and democratic, right? And then they could make a bunch of humans who are like super tribal and they're like barbaric and they want to, war on everything. And that would be interesting and different. Yeah. And within the realm of imagination and creativity of a fantasy world.
I feel like the very first sentence of the book that we will one day make, because it's gonna happen whether or not it's gonna happen. The very first line of the book is, these are all guidelines, you're only limited by your imagination, or something along those lines.
I agree. Technically, I think One of the D&D books does start that off, but it doesn't. It's not the first two lines. It's somewhere at the beginning. But honestly, most people don't read that stuff, and that's a shame. And we need to make it such that it's like super obvious, super big. Like there are a lot of folks who, when they get into D&D and they've been playing for a while, or if they're new, whatever. There are some DMs who kind of get caught up in this rules lawyer mechanic setup. There are players that do that too, right? But they have not been, it has not been trained into them, or they have not realized, it has not dawned on them, right? They have not had the epiphany that really the first thing should be fun always comes first. That should actually be the first line. Fun always comes first. The limits here are only guidelines. Really, the true limits are only the limits of your imagination, right? Because that is the essence of role-playing games, right? And that's why I like the idea of just ditching alignment altogether, because it solves a lot of problems. It doesn't actually, by adding it in, it doesn't solve any problems or make anything more interesting. It actually makes things more difficult for no reason. It's one of those kinds of mechanics that it doesn't need to exist within the game. That's what I have come to believe over my decades of playing TTRPGs, is that alignment is just an unnecessary addition. That's too limiting. And it limits the way the DM can tell his stories, and it limits the players on how they can tell their character's story.
Yeah. I definitely feel like that's something that really needs to be highlighted in the very beginning. And then when it comes to like character creation, having like some starting off points and just saying like, this is the starting off point to what your character will grow to be. This is where your character is at now. If you need a line, like, you know, giving the option, like if you need a guideline for like an alignment of where you are currently, this could be it.
See, I don't know. I'm glad we're discussing this. I'm sorry to interrupt you and disagree with you. I feel like if we're going to have alignments, we're going to have alignments, or we're going to ditch them, right?
Okay.
Like, I feel like, I guess what I'm getting at is I think that people who get into RPGs and want to play them are sharp enough that they don't need that particular limit.
Yeah.
You know, they want to make a character. They want to make a character, and they want to live out a fantasy of being this character in a fantasy world. Right?
Yeah.
They already have a vision in their mind of how that character is going to be and act to a certain degree. And the more they come up with a backstory and an ancestry for that character, the more they're going to be able to continue to fill out, hey, Insomnia Knight, no worries, brother, no worries at all.
This time.
Yeah, Eltacine, the player's handbook does say that. It's just not early enough in my perspective, and it needs to be like the core focus, because again, there are a lot of folks out there playing D&D, and if as long as they're having fun, that's fine. But there are a lot of folks out there that they get too caught up in the rules and the mechanics of the game, and they forget that the fun always comes first, and it's really a DM's job to help the players have fun. Right, that's the primary goal of a good DM, is to help the players have fun, to facilitate that fun. You got to be a good DM. You got to have fun when your players are having fun. Like, part of my life philosophy is the reason why I feel like I'm a good DM, and that's that the people that I care about, I find joy when they are in joy. Right? When they're enjoying their life and themselves, it brings me joy. And that's my first philosophy as a DM, Can I help? And I fail sometimes. Don't get me wrong. There are times when, I stumble a bit, and there have been times in my past where I have gotten caught up in the rules a bit too much and had arguments. And I failed as a player before too. But it's through these failures that I feel like I've learned and grown, and why I'm confident that the key to great role playing is this philosophy of let's have fun, guys. And the DM that wants his players to have fun is going to be way more successful. So, yes. And I honestly, like I said, I think that alignment. The reason why I know it will work without it is because my regular playing group that we play with on Sundays, we basically kind of did away with alignment a long time ago, and it works fine, right?
Yeah.
And you guys, when we started Isles in the Mist, you may have written down something for your alignment, but we've never focused on that on that side of things.
Yeah.
You know how to be true to your character more than I as a DM. I shouldn't, it's like, don't you think it seems like an asynchronous thing when a DM tries to tell a player, oh, your character wouldn't do that because of this alignment restriction? I mean,
I would just be
it's
like,
a friction point. It's a friction point. I mean, they could be right from a certain point of view, right? But ultimately, just because a person is generally of a certain alignment doesn't mean that they're not going to make mistakes, right? Or if it's considered a mistake, or just simply go outside that line. So,
yeah, just to add to that too, because Fate and I talk about our characters literally all the time. We're always we're talking about our characters all the time, whether it's Isles in the Mist, or it's our Friday game that we have. It's never a conversation of alignment. It's always a how would Fern react to this? How would Lorcris react to this? And it's like we'll do hypothetical things. Like if this happens, how would Fern react? She would probably freak out and try to kill them. Or she would, whatever kind of hypothetical situation it is, but it's never because she's chaotic neutral or chaotic good. How would she react to this? It's the actual as a character, how and as her own entity, how would she as this, it's harder for me to put her in that box of chaotic good and to be able to make decisions that way. It's easier for me to go, okay, I am now Fern. How would Fern do these things? It's very different, and it's a very different mindset, and it's so much harder to dictate choices when it is based on alignment versus based on her and in the situation itself. Because the situations, it's it could literally be she wouldn't care if Lorcris did a thing, but if she saw somebody else do it, she might go, why would you do that? But she literally just watched Lorcris do it, and she's like, it's Lorcris, it's fine. But that, who knows? Who knows until she's there?
And you just kind of teased on it too, and that is that if you try and judge a character, whether it's yours or somebody else's, based upon the lens of an alignment, that lens is going to be your interpretation of that alignment. And your interpretation of an alignment may not necessarily line up with other players and the DM's interpretation of that alignment. And that right there is the core of the problem of alignment as a philosophy, right? Yeah. A lot of people, here's a perfect example. Most players who first get into D&D, when they read the alignments and they read about paladins, they automatically assume they get it. Some really are drawn to that, and some are really actively kind of, ew, that's yucky. Paladins are really awful. You know, they're always going to try and enforce their laws and everybody else, and you know, they're very strict and yada yada yada, and they're always going to go out of their way to kill evil and stuff like that. But personally, if you really dig deep into the idea of lawful, and that's old school, by the way, not 5th edition. 5th edition did away with paladins having to be lawful good, right? But in the old days, paladins were the quintessential holy knight, right? The crusader, right? But and people were right to really call that out, because crusaders were kind of awful. They were trying to force their views on other people, right?
Yes.
But on the same token, so now there's this disconnect, because people are like, okay, a paladin is lawful good, but a paladin acts this way, so lawful good is bad. I don't like this. But really, if you stop and think about lawful good in a philosophical perspective, right? A lawful good person would, yes, they would try and uphold the law and order, because that's just, they believe that order and law is a better society, right? And they would try and be a good person, in that they would go out of their way to help people, they would heal people, they wouldn't want to hurt people. Well, a paladin or a crusader doesn't really fit in as good if you look at that from that perspective, because, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to tell you guys an example of my favorite D&D character that I ever created for myself, that I've ever played with. I've only gotten to play with him once, and it was so much fun. I created in 3.5, there are a couple of special types of things you could do. I created a monk. I forget which race he was. He was probably human, but maybe not. And his name was Archon. And what was unique about him was he had a special prestige class. I forget. I'm kind of forgetting it. But the bottom line is he took two special things about himself. One, he took these vows. He took a vow of poverty and a vow of nonviolence. And you're like, wait a minute. How does a character in Dungeons and Dragons take a vow of nonviolence? But it was so much fun, and I made him lawful good. And to me, he was the truest, purest form of lawful good. Why? Because he would go out of his way not only to help and heal people, but he would go out of his way to try and save the evil people that were trying to kill him. He would go out of his way to try and... There was this one adventure where we went into this goblin cave, and they were led by this ogre. And my character was super charismatic, and I made these great arguments philosophically, and my DM went with it. And I literally talked this ogre into giving up his life as a tyrant and to go off and be an ascetic monk, because I made great convincing arguments, and I made good rolls, and ultimately it was such a fun adventure. And that, to me, is the right way to play a truly lawful good person, because a good person wants everyone to succeed. They want to share the world, right? A good person doesn't necessarily go out of their way to hurt other people, right? And so that was the point of all that big old long story, is that it's really about interpretation of the alignments, and the alignment system is so nuanced. It's too nuanced. It's too arbitrary in some way. I mean, I guess it's a contradiction. There are ways where it's too nuanced and ways where it's not nuanced enough. When the alignment system is in place, it actually takes away nuance, I believe. And that's why I like this idea of just doing away with it. And as Insomnia Night said, they did away with alignment on their stuff. And I just think, hey, Majestic Wolf, hello.
I like what I'm curious to know what you think of what Iltacine says when he asks, what about a morality system instead of an alignment?
My initial instinct on this, obviously, was something that we need to kind of think about. But my initial
I wrote it down.
Right. My initial reaction is that The problem then is still the same. It's like, what problem are you trying to solve by adding a system at all? Like, for example, when I go and play Fallout on the computer, let's take Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas as an example. There's no alignment for my character. I can go and do whatever I want, right? If I want to go into the town, you get this, one of the first towns you go to, you have all these, they tell you, oh, we're going to be, these raiders are going to come and we got to pay our stuff to them and blah, blah, blah. If you want to, you can actually kill all the townspeople and side with the raiders, or vice versa. You can save the townspeople and kill all the raiders, or you can do neither one and just say, oh, well, this is their problem and go on your merry way, right? So my point of that is that when you're creating your character in an RPG on a computer, or there's no like, when it's a true open sandbox kind of world, there's no need for the alignment. It's just it's an arbitrary limitation, and there's no way to actually, if you think about it, there's no way to arbitrate that an alignment in a game, other than when a game developer has created a story that's very black and white. About the only way I could see a black and white, and I did this in one of my campaigns. I did a Berserk-inspired campaign. For folks who don't know, Berserk is an anime from the 90s. And it was basically about fighting demons. And that one was, despite the fact that almost every enemy that the players faced were demons, I still was even able to add nuance into that. Even though the demons are obviously going to, they're literally from hell, so they must always be evil, right? But I am of the perspective that pretty much, there's no I feel like even a demon could potentially find a reason to not be evil anymore, or vice versa. An angel could find a reason to become evil, right? So, any rate, that's what I think for our RPG. I think we should do away with alignment because it solves some problems that are, and it doesn't solve any problems that actually exist in the game. Yeah. As far as guidelines go, you can, as long as the DM is helping the players create their character, they can help them decide what their motivations are, right? And then that's going to be dynamic in the world that they've created. Yeah. So and just to highlight something that Ilt says, is murder hoboism a problem to solve? No. There's gonna be people. No matter what we do, there are gonna be people that are just want to do the murder hobo game. Oh, you meant like in an overarching yeah, you're right. No, I agree. It's not a problem. You can play like literally like the sky is the limit, and I don't think it's a problem. Right. And you guys hinted on this, right? If we do it like this, then if somebody wants to do the murder hobo stuff, they still can, right? Yeah. This doesn't limit that. If somebody wants to play the old traditional way, then they know of alignments. They can put them in their game if they want, right? Yeah. It's flexible. Exactly. That's exactly it. I want our RPG to be as open and flexible as possible so that anybody can pick it up easily and go, oh, wow, this is super easy to get into. And I can get super nuanced, or I can get super focused in black and white. Hey, Lee, welcome back. Yes, you're right, Insomnia Knight. As a DM, there's lots of ways to fix stuff, right? Absolutely. But I feel like that at the beginning at character creation, it's more fun for my players, I've found, when the DM works with the players on how they exist in the world that the DM is creating. A lot of times, players and DMs have kind of a disconnect. A DM will have their vision and idea of a world that they've created, and they just want to plop the players into it right? But in reality, the characters of those players are part of that world. And so if you want the players to feel a part of that world, it's better to work with them to integrate their background and backstory into the way the world is. Because, yeah, like for example, here's another example. In my personal play group I was telling you about that I play on Sundays. For the first time in many, many years, I will not be DMing it very soon. Our friend will be DMing it, and I can't wait. I haven't played in forever, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. But when we first started, I had this kind of idea in my mind of a character I wanted to play, right? There's a certain race in 3.5. It's a really unique, different kind of race called, I forget the name of it. It's like, not Hellspawn, but like, I forget the name of it, but it's this interesting concept where your character was basically already a really bad person. They had already been done a lot of evil deeds in their life, and they've already been damned and gone to hell. But somehow or another, the forces of hell, like I forget the real backstory of it, but basically the idea of the race is that they get shunted out of hell and get a chance to redeem themselves. And so they go out of their way to do good deeds to try and find that redemption. Sort of like Constantine in a way from DC Comics, right? They want to redeem themselves, right? And so that was this character race. And so I talked to my friend about that kind of, if I could play that race in his world. And we talked more about his world, which is going to be very dragon focused. It's focused. The deities aren't your regular D&D deities. They're all dragons, and the heaven and hell of his world are dragon focused. And so because of that, my character idea wasn't really going to work. We could have worked something out in a way, but the bottom line is it wasn't. It was going to be shoehorned. And it wasn't going to feel like my character concept, my race concept was going to fit. And so it was okay. I didn't mind switching gears into something else, right?
Yeah.
And or he was perfectly happy working with me to make some sort of variant of it if I wanted to. And that's the key, right? Working with your players to craft a world together. Yeah.
Well, that's also for our next campaign. That's one of the reasons why I have like 0 ideas, 0 concepts, nothing. And I want to sit down with you and completely build my character from scratch with you. And of course, there's going to be things that I'm kind of leaning more towards a martial class. I think that I would have a lot more fun with a martial class. No big deal, but whatever. But like, it's one of the main reasons why I'm like, oh no, Stormy, you and I are gonna go deep, and we're just gonna hang out, and we're just gonna build this character together.
Right.
Which I think would be really fun.
Agreed. I agree. It's always a better experience that way, I think. Instead of because then there's not a sort of a disconnected, disjointed kind of oh wow, my character is just plopped in this world that has no kind of thematic connection to them at all. So then it makes it really tough for the DM to try and create any interesting interconnections with their backstory. And whereas if you work together on it, it works out. And again, doing away with alignment, instead helping the player focus on the motivations and the personality of the character, that's way more important. So thank you so much for saying that, Izolade. Majestic Wolf was asking if I streamed that campaign.
He was asking if you're going to be streaming your Sunday group campaign.
Oh no!
And I shook my head no.
Yeah.
And then that's why Insomnia Night was like, why not?
Sorry, buddy. That's a personal group that it's just not what they're into. So yeah. I appreciate your enthusiasm though. It's awesome. Yeah, I like this, and then so part two of this conversation, if we decide that we all are kind of concurred that we can do away with alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also next week when we, or not next week, but in a couple of weeks when we have another RPG talk, when we talk about race versus ancestry versus backstory and stuff, I feel like a first level character should get some additional bonus points from their ancestry and maybe even their background, right? That way the first level character won't be, you know, as weak as a baby. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And we just have to figure out the math of how much it breaks the concept of the ability score progression later on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's doable. I think it's fixable. And I don't think any ability score bumps that you get will come from race at all. Instead, like I said, they'll come from ancestry and from backstory.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we do away with any kind of, you know, unnuanced limitations saying, you know, half orcs are always stronger, dwarves are always healthier, you know, halflings are always faster, you know. Like I said, if I want to make a slow ass Durgar who's a bruiser, you know, or an orc, not even just a half orc. If I want to make an orc raised character who's super charismatic and good at talking people into stuff, I should be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And that way you give more agency to the player, and you
have a lot more flexibility for a backstory too. So why is this orc so charismatic? Okay, that comes from background.
Yeah.
So his background is, so he grew up, you know, as the fifth born son, and
that
to
might
be
be
able to
more
make a name for
ancestry
him.
than background. That part right there, right? But
I don't.
I'm
just making something up on the fly.
No. That's good stuff. I didn't mean to correct you. I apologize. That is good stuff.
Yeah.
And that is also why we should discuss this. Is ancestry and backstory a bit too close together? Do we need to have two separate ones, or can we just make it one thing? And
well, your ancestry would just be your race.
No, ancestry would be more like your heritage, right? You're right in a way. It's sort of race, but it's not. It's your ancestry, right? Like if you're talking about race as a race, then you're talking about your genetic makeup, right? Whereas if you're talking about ancestry, you could actually have somewhere in your
cultural practices.
What?
Like your cultural practices?
Yeah, well, cultural practices or your ancestry would include like your family. You know, were your family nobles, right? Or were they poor, right? That's part of the ancestry. Again, it might make it too complicated. I want it to be simple and easy to pick up. It might be too complicated to have ancestry and backstory at the same time.
Yeah, because there's a person like me so I'm like, okay, so you're saying ancestry. So like my ancestry, like of course I'm gonna equate it to myself first before I equate it to another character I'm creating, right? So like ancestry. So my ancestry is, middle class, working class. Both my parents were divorced and we had to blend families, which so my ancestry is like kind of weird. Like I had, my great grandparents immigrated to the United States and like refused to teach like the culture and language because they wanted us to just be like, we're Americans now. So like, so that's ancestry. Is that what you're meaning by that? Versus like, I'm a quarter Filipino and a whole plethora of other things. That would be like the racial. So we're talking about three separate things, not two things.
Right. If you're talking about, yeah, and that's why I knew this would be a tough topic to tackle in one session, and why it might take two or more to tackle. Because really, I guess what I'm getting at is I think for our game, we want the race that you pick to be aesthetic, not
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? It needs to be because I think this is cool, right?
Yeah.
That needs to be the reason. It needs to be the
and like,
aesthetics of it.
yeah, and like little things like whether or not they get dark vision, that's
Well, but even that, one could argue that, well, what if there's, if you want to talk about, if it's a genetic trait, it's possible that a human could develop a genetic trait where they get dark vision, especially in a fantasy world, right? Maybe what we'll have to do is create like sort of an initial point system where you have some points that you can spend on certain things that are either racial or ancestral or backstory, and when you spend those points, you get a couple of bullet point scores. You get dark vision, or you get the if you're something like that. I don't know. We have to be careful though, because again, we can overly complicate it. And that's why we have these talks, right? To try and, I want to drill down to the simplest solution that still gives people lots of options and freedom to craft this awesome aesthetic character, both visually aesthetic and internally like a personality aesthetic. So. Yes, Lee. Yeah, that is our intent. Why we have our RPG talks every couple of weeks. It's only for an hour, which means we need to start wrapping up here, which is sad. I'm sorry, we guys have got to go soon. Yes, Lee, we are developing our own RPG. It's basically we decided this during the whole kind of drama of Wizards of the Coast earlier this year.
It was kickstarted because of that. However, Stormy has expressed this is something he's been thinking about for a really long time. So, though
that's true,
it was kickstarted by the whole, Wizards of the Coast fiasco.
Yeah.
It has been something that's been chilling into the back of his mind forever. And of course, I am always more than happy to talk about these kinds of things and to figure them out.
Yes, and I look forward to a day where we can have an RPG talk where Fate and Dark Kitty can join us too, because that would be awesome. So.
Yes, who knows, that might be coming up. At least one special guest star for TTRPG.
Yeah, maybe we'll see. Hopefully, depending. We can't promise anything now. So
no, can't.
You got to be careful promises. What we tease if we can't follow through.
Well, I don't know.
I know. So, having said that, I think we did kind of drill down to some interesting concepts. Oh, I know, Lee. I know there are lots of companies out there developing their own thing now because of it. I don't care. Honestly, I'm not trying to be mean. Please take this the right way. My intent, what I mean by that is, I am the kind of person, if I want to do something, I'm going to go for it. And I'm going to get in action and make it happen. Not just sit on it and go, oh, well, somebody else is going to do it, so, why bother? No, I'm not going to be that way. I mean, if it's something that's meaningful to me, like I said, I've been thinking about this. I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons since 1981, probably before most of you were born. Not all, but many. Or when some of you were little kids. I was actually a little kid too when I started. But the point is, does that make me some expert? No. It just means that I have a lot of experience with tabletop RPGs. And because of that, like she said, I've always had this kind of thing brewing, percolating in the back of my head of what can I do to make a system even better and more enjoyable and easier to get into, and that's That's the intent that we're going for.
And even if we get to a point where we like actually make this into a book and it becomes a thing and we only sell 5 copies and it's literally just me and Fate, Stormy, Star Kitty, and like one other person, we don't care.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
It will still be cool to be like, look, we made a book.
Yeah. And we're playing it live on stream.
Yeah. And if people want to buy it, cool. If people think it's ridiculous and they're like, meh, I like this one better, cool. We don't care. We don't care.
Yeah.
We're just happy to, we're just, you know, also, even if any, you know, it's just another fun and creative way to like, to do the things. Like, it's a really good brain exercise. It's a really good way to talk. It's a good way to like get the creative juices flowing.
Right.
Heck yes. Oh, right. Don't you worry. If it ever comes, when it comes to the Kickstarter part, you will know. I will not shut up about it. You know how much I have been promoting it? Yeah. I have not stopped talking about it.
We got him there, I think. Almost. Super close. Like
hold on. Aries.
He said something in chat a little while ago. I don't know.
He said, okay, Druid, it will happen. Done the 2 big things. I will not announce nothing. That's not my plan.
We have to leave that up to him. Let's just say that we think we're close.
But if you haven't already, go follow DGamer Aries.
Right.
It's my number 1 thing that I've been pushing for. Because we are at war. And
once we're there, then we'll help find another amazing person in our community to highlight and lift up too.
Yes.
And I know Aries will be 100% on board with helping us with that, without a doubt. Yep. And that's what we love about him.
100%.
And
I'm at war with him.
Zolade said something a little more specific, and we're gonna keep on to that, Zolade, for the next chat. I appreciate that.
I'll write it down.
Yeah. And because we do actually need to wrap out. Druid needs to go spend some time with actual plants. She's going to spend some time in the yard before she goes to work tonight. So
I have a store meeting. They have to teach us how to use this new piece of equipment. Okay. We have to talk about roles of job.
Okay. Sounds cool.
Like, all right, cool, whatever. Yeah. All right.
Well, as soon as she's done writing that down, we will wrap up for the day. Thank you guys so much for spending an hour of your time with us this afternoon. I know it's a different day. I apologize for the shock and all of it. Normally it's either on a Wednesday or a Thursday, but sometimes we are beholden to our IRL schedules, and that was the situation with Druid today. So
instead of, I'm just gonna take a picture of it.
Yeah, I was thinking, or you could copy and paste it too. That
you know what?
The picture is actually easier, way easier. So
did it.
Right on. Okay, guys. Well, you all have a wonderful evening. We'll keep you updated. Don't forget that this Friday is Bandwidth and Banter again. It'll be, is this Friday a 2 p.m. one? Yeah, I think so. It's a very special one. We're going to have our one and only extirpate Fate on the show. So we get to interview inside our within the family even deeper. So
if you go, so be ready. If you guys have any questions for Fate, think about it. So when we are ready to pass on questions to chat, you guys are ready with some questions.
Right.
If you have any. If you don't, that's cool. That's fine. But if you have any questions, or if you're curious or whatever, think about it.
Yep, we'll always reserve the last half hour of the interview for that. So we appreciate you guys so much. Fate must be in a separate room from Druid. Ooh. I don't know if that's even doable though with the tech they have over there. So,
it wouldn't look good.
Yeah, we'll be okay. I appreciate the idea, as always. And as always, thank you all for joining Bandwidth and Banter. You want to outro us there, Druid?
Thank you so much, you guys, for sitting here and listening to us talk. We love the creative process. We love your guys' your inputs and thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. We love you guys.
Indeed. Catch y'all later. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Goodbye, guys.